Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, you sound good.
Okay. We'll go with that. Um, yeah. So we had a little announcement there from Norm. Before we get started, I'll just let everybody know that I appreciate all the guest ideas that got tossed out last time for future. We tried to get a couple different folks lined up for today, and they weren't able to join us. So fortunately, we got Chuck Kennedy to join us today, and it should be an interesting talk from Chuck. If anybody has any other ideas or anything, please feel free to just shoot an email. And a reminder, I'll be sending out a show notes email in a couple of days and let everybody know about some of the things we talked about. Chuck shared some information with me, and I'll send that out to everybody later. And with that, Pete, I will throw it over to you, and we'll just go ahead and get started. And Chuck is Pete's fairly familiar with Chuck. I think they've known each other for a little bit, and we'll just let him do the intro.
Yeah, no, I think I don't want to say too much because this is, I just leave it to Chuck. But I mean, I know Chuck from when I was working at the Chicago Tribune in DC, and he was working for Knight Ridder Tribune. The Tribune owned a stake in Knight Ridder, at least in the wire service. And so that's how I got to know Chuck. I mean, I basically used his, back in the days when we were still shooting film, had to use the KRT darkroom to get my stuff processed. And then when I got the job as President Obama's photographer, I mean, I think the first person I hired was Chuck. I mean, part of it was I know I needed somebody to worry about the logistics for certain things, but also in terms of the archive, knowing that all the big events and really any of the public events, I needed somebody to make sure we were getting the money shot, because since, I'd be tagging along with President Obama, I wasn't able to be in a position to get that, head-on position or, just a key money shot. And Chuck also did a ton of remotes at the White House, which, was invaluable for the archive. And and then just most recently, after we left the Obama White House, Chuck spent, I guess, almost a year with working for Mayor Pete on his campaign, and has really a great set of pictures of Mayor Pete from that campaign. And with that, I'll just throw it out to Chuck.
Well, thanks for everyone for huddling around your laptops in your basements and home offices and whatnot. Can you hear me?
Clearly. Very well.
Okay. Yeah, in addition to that, I think after leaving the administration, aside from that most recent year in 2019 of doing a lot of work with Mayor Pete, I've done a lot for the Obama Foundation, and I'm still lucky enough to kind of get to see a lot of our former colleagues kind of furthering the stuff that we worked on during the administration, which has been sort of a fun thing to do. It's like getting the band back together, going on a road trip once in a while. Like a year ago, I was in Malaysia and Vietnam with the Obamas for stuff they were doing there. We came back, I finished up the campaign with Mayor Pete, and then we all got, in lockdown for COVID like we are now. So after the Pete campaign, concluded, I started talking to Adam Schultz, who's now the Pete Souza of the Biden administration, and offered to him whatever help and support I could give him through a convention that became not typical, an election night, which went on for a week. And then after, the declaration of, the Biden win, offered to help him set up for the inauguration, because I knew he was going to be stuck in Delaware and really hadn't worked directly in DC before. And this would have been, I think, my 6th inaugural, which kind of puts me in the old category, but still younger than your last week's guest category. So he took me up on that, and we just tried to piece together, how we could put a team together that could work effectively around, 25,000 National Guard troops and police officers from 16 or 17 different agencies, and whatever, COVID responsibilities we would have to work in a crowd situation, and make some good pictures that the current occupants of the White House would have access to, for their archive and their place in history. So I guess I will start by showing you what a inauguration in 2013 looked like. If Steve can give me host access, I can click over to that.
Yes, stand by just 1 second. I just switched to a full screen view, which messed everything up.
I mean, it was kind of interesting, everything.
Yeah, you should be host now.
Okay, do you see that?
Yep, looks great.
Okay. All right. Let me just close one window here. This is 2013. This is President Obama's second inaugural. And this is what a, over the shoulder shot looks like during your typical inauguration. No social distancing and people as far as the eye can see. And we knew in advance that that was not going to be the case, and they were going to do some things to mitigate the number of people who would gather. And yet we still wanted to preserve what would be like a traditional look at, a second. There we go. One of the things I was tasked with doing is recreating a remote I did originally in 2009, which was the first time it had been done, but it sort of gave this new view of the swearing in from a much closer than a 600 millimeter kind of, long lens kind of view. This was the contraption that I had put together in 2009, which, as you'll notice, was the only camera there, yielding that photo, which got a great deal of use in the press. And you fast forward to 2021, where this is the view of the Capitol complex from both inside and outside the perimeter that was put up after the things that Scotty talked about last week. Not your friendly neighborhood Capitol plaza that I used to enjoy walking around at night when I lived in the neighborhood. The night before the inauguration, the Bidens and the Harrises wanted to recognize the 400,000 people who had died of COVID, and they had a memorial lighting at the Lincoln Memorial, which I covered as well. And it was really just for friends and family who came with them in the motorcade. They lined the reflecting pool with these pylons that would light up when they, had their moment of silence. This is where having a 6 or 8 foot ladder comes in handy. So on the morning of an inauguration, you leave your hotel that's on Capitol Hill at 3:30 in the morning and kind of go through, I was kind of joking, it's like going through a rat maze of bike rack and security fencing But this was the view from one of the Senate office buildings of, you know, the National Guard getting ready to deploy for their day to guard the perimeter. My colleague from the AP, Andy Harnick, who's a heck of a nice guy and an even better photographer, he did the press pool position for the remote that I was working for the administration to do. So here we are, I guess, at 5 or 6 in the morning, bolting our stuff down and making sure that the microphones and stuff that were placed up there wouldn't be like encroaching into our pictures, which they do. Now, if you think back to that first photo, which had the packed mall and the grounds, this was how everything was spaced out for, the VIP seating, near the base of the Capitol. So definitely a little more open. As I was saying to Pete the other day, you get so focused on managing and setting up like one remote for one specific photo that you kind of lose time, the precious time to start shooting the rest of the scene. So in between climbs up and down the ladder to my position and back to the remote, I was trying to, as people filled up, at least make some overalls. I ran into my old friend, Pete Buttigieg. So instead of having a crowd on the mall, some very smart advanced person filled it with US flags and flags from every state, filled the mall space where people would be. I think National Geographic did one of those day-night photos from that green cherry picker midway down the mall. But the interesting thing about this is that's Marine One carrying President Trump from the White House on his last flight to Andrews Air Force Base for when he departed Washington. I kind of knew he was going to leave around 8 in the morning, so I just kind of kept one eye on that end of the mall because I kind of wanted to have his farewell. So these pictures are a set that I shot with, from my fixed position on the main press riser. Typically that position would hold, I think, about 10 photographers plus a TV, pool feed, 2 TV cameras, whatever. Due to COVID, all of the manned positions at the Capitol that day were cut down to 30% of their normal capacity. So where there would have been, 9 or 10 on this spot, there was 3, an AP photographer, myself, and someone from the architect of the Capitol's office. But with a 500 millimeter, you can kind of cover pretty much from the walkout to the podium, and kind of, get the stuff you needed. I will point out that Lady Gaga had a gold microphone. That's all I'm going to say. The VP gets sworn in first. And then I start using the remote for primarily that purpose to get that angle. And it kind of worked out really nice here, the reaction that the vice president and her husband have after she's sworn in.
Hey, Chuck, quick question. Do you have that? Are you firing that yourself, or is that automatic, or how'd you have that going?
For the inaugural, I'm still a Canon user, and Canon very generously lent me a new Canon R5 with the wide angle zoom. I had hoped to hardwire to be able to, run it back to the position I was shooting from, but access to the site got so disrupted after the insurrection on the 6th that I ended up having to use a radio, just a plain old pocket wizard with you know, a dedicated channel that's just my own, so no one else can fire it. But it was still like a little uncomfortable. Like, is it going to make the 75 feet? Is there going to be too much radio stuff in the airwaves? You know, are my batteries going to get too cold? Anyway, I tested it a bunch of times a couple days beforehand, and it seemed solid. So I didn't worry about it too much. But I was, as I was shooting with the long lens, I was actually hand firing it with the, you know, my other hand, because I didn't trust the connection in the hot shoe. So yes, I was firing it.
And quick follow up on that. You're shooting for the administration, so you're not feeding these out, correct? To anybody?
Yeah, I was, you know, hired by and paid by the Presidential Inaugural Committee, which handles, you know, all of these events, whatever they would be. And then those images would then go into the future presidential archive. There was no releasing to any press, which is why we, you know, partnered with, in this case, the AP, that they would be the pool photographer doing the remote alongside mine, so that we had one official account and one media account. You know, Pete and I were looking at the toe marks from the setup picture from, you know, the inaugural prior, and it was, you know, seeing Bo's name, you know, taped out there and not having him here for this moment was sad. So then I, you know, after the ceremony at the Capitol was done, my next thing wasn't really until like 9 o'clock that night. I had wanted to do a picture of the fireworks that they were going to have, and I knew a good spot to do that was top of a hotel that's across Lafayette Park from the White House, and a rooftop I'd used 2 or 3 times over the course of the administration for various things. And I reached out to them, and I reached out to Secret Service, and I was like, hey, I want to do this, and everyone signed off on it. So I used that kind of gap in the afternoon to download photos and send select pictures to the editor who was working on behalf of the team, so that we could get some display prints made for the next day for when the, you know, the new president would come into work and be able to see some photos from the inauguration on the wall. So me and the hotel engineer went up to the rooftop, and, you know, I set up my tripod, and I knew it was supposed to start at like 9:58 p.m. timed with a TV finale for an event that was going on at the Lincoln Memorial. And with no warning, boom, the fireworks started. And I think I only got about 16 frames before they were done. This being my favorite of the bunch. But that's sort of how I ended my day, you know, from, you know, 3:30 in the morning with thousands of National Guard troops at one end of town to, you know, a windy rooftop of a 5-star hotel for a really good view of the fireworks. So I think that was the last of the photos that I had set aside.
Anybody have questions for Chuck so far?
This is Pete. Can you hear me? I was having some problems there. So Chuck, refresh my memory. So one of the things that happens when you start hiring people for the White House, it takes a while to get people on board. And so when you did the remote in 2009, my recollection is that you were the one pool camera for everybody, correct?
Yeah. So I guess, Pete, you didn't even get asked to be the chief official until a couple of weeks before the inaugural, as I recall.
Right. Yeah.
And then, you know, kind of wink and a nod, you and I started talking about, you know, joining the government. And I was still a night redder. After, so if you back up the time machine to Bush's second inauguration, I was positioned on that balcony overlooking the whole mall and behind the podium. And I remember looking at the podium and I remember saying to myself, this is really crazy. It looks like a yard sale down there. There's all kinds of crap and, wires and stuff at the base of the podium. Why hasn't anyone ever put a camera down there? And I sort of banked that in my head. 4 years go by. I end up covering, a good chunk of the Obama campaign. And I'm planning for his inauguration. And I kind of had that idea in the back of my mind. And I pretty aggressively lobbied Capitol Hill and a number of authorities to get permission to do it. So I was the only camera allowed to do it. And as part of that agreement, my office agreed to share it with everybody. So it was sort of like a gift back to.
Well, and I think that I can't remember how this happened, but I know that we got a copy of it for the archive too, because we sort of used it. Well, if it's a pool photo, then we should be able to use it as well. And then normally years, the presidential inaugural committee will hire photographers for the the different stands, because I was by myself. I didn't have anybody else on staff yet, and so we had access to some of the selects from the presidential inaugural committee.
Yeah, because it was your goal to, like we did, and this is where I got the idea, but it was your goal to be able to have prints made by the lab to hang on the walls of the West Wing of the White House, so that when everyone showed up to work the next day, they would see what they were a part of.
Yeah.
And
then
you solicited selects from 2 or 3 different groups of people to be able to kind of make an edit.
Where it's easier to cover inauguration in terms of the White House, the presidential photographer, is if there's a reelect, because in 2013 it was our game, so we could kind of do whatever we wanted in terms of, well, we'd still have to work with the Jeff Kent on the Hill in terms of getting a position and stuff like that, but we had much more flexibility about where we needed to put people to cover the day. And just, it's harder that first inauguration.
It is, and that's what I was trying to help Adam and Lawrence through, was like, I knew coming from the motorcade, they could get so far into the Capitol, but they would never be able to get into the position for the money shot on the head-on or the main pressurizer.
Right.
And that like in 2 or 3 places around town, we needed people, given the difficulties of moving, particularly this year, like preset in different zones to cover Lafayette Park in the parade portion, or when he got out of the car and walked, or someone at the Lincoln Memorial for the performance that night. And so I was just trying to break down all of the city into zones, and kind of split up the coverage with the team that we put together. I gave Steve kind of everybody's bio and link of the people who helped pull this off for the Bidens this time.
Yeah.
In case anyone wants to dig deeper. Where is it? Did you have something else, Pete?
No, I mean, I guess it's sort of interesting that when I covered inaugurations as a outside photographer, as a news photographer, when I was with the Tribune, I always thought it was like super hard to get from the Capitol to the White House, because there were so many fucking people.
It's crazy.
Like hundreds of thousands of people, and I think I ended up walking. Well, it's not that far, but it's pretty far. And I just wonder, what was that part of it easier this year? Like, because
it's funny. I almost went back and downloaded a city map that showed like all the street closures from the Capitol to the Lincoln Memorial, and it was insane. And it was like the one like, I'm not worried about getting to my spot. I was worried about how to get from home to like where I walked in the gate and what I do with my car, because I'm not going to get on the subway during a pandemic. I'm not going to get in an Uber at 3 a.m. I ended up renting a hotel room on Capitol Hill just so that I could walk that last couple blocks and knew that I could stash my car in a parking garage there. But in the end, there was a movement of press photographers on a like charter bus from the Capitol to Lafayette Park to leapfrog them ahead while the new president was doing some stuff inside the Capitol after he was sworn in. There was like an hour and a half window of time to make a movement to kind of leapfrog ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think people just have to understand how difficult it is to move around. You know, whether there's hundreds of thousands of people there or not, just for security. And just, you know, obviously it was amped up this year, I guess, because of, you know, what happened on 1/6. I mean, in 2009, I also rented a hotel. And then in 2013, before the inauguration, 2013, I slept in my office the night before, just because it's so hard to get back and forth from home. And then the same thing in 2017, before Trump's inauguration, I actually slept in Josh Earnest's office.
Oh, he has a good couch.
He has a good couch, except like at 3 o'clock in the morning, the GSA folks came in to clean out the fireplace and woke me up. But anyway, that's another story. Yeah, I'll throw it open to other people to ask.
Thoughts, questions, concerns?
I just wanted to say this, Chuck's discussion reminds me of how much logistics play a part in photography. You know, taking the picture is in some cases the simplest part of the job, and getting everything set up and getting in and out. And then if you were photographing in another country, you'd have the logistics of getting the images back. And now, of course, that's much easier today with the digital, but back in the day of film, I recall Life magazine covered Churchill's funeral and developed the film on the plane coming back to New York City. So they'd have a head start on their layout. So yeah, I appreciate all the background work that goes on.
Well, I was having this conversation the other day with somebody, and it's like, yes, you want to plan for the perfect thing, but you get so wound up in keeping the thing perfect that you lose the ability to sort of just walk around and take pictures. And that, like, everything about this event for me was like making sure everybody was where they could be in a position to make a good picture. You know, so it's like me thinking of myself and 9 other people. And, you know, it's just, it eats away your ability to just take pictures, which is kind of unfortunate, but, you know, you're trying to look at it from the point of like, okay, 5 people, 8 people, 10 people are going to cover very different aspects of this. And as a group, it turns out to be a really nice thing.
Yeah, it's you're part of a team, and in this case, you're kind of leading the team, so you have to be concerned about everyone else. And your own part as a photographer is minimized compared to your leadership and planning role.
Well, I mean, the other thing too is like, you know, Adam and his editor Chandler, they hadn't really worked in Washington before, and they were, you know, still being based out of Delaware because the transition was still happening up there. Having covered Capitol Hill for a long time and knowing the people in play there, it was very easy for me to pick up the phone and call some people and say, look, I'm trying to help these guys out. Here's what we need, and nothing fall through the cracks, which was kind of all I was offering, was, you know, just making sure that nothing got overlooked and everyone could get something.
I've got a question and then also a tangential comment about the Winston Churchill thing that Norm brought up. Life magazine, they had everything ready when the plane landed in Chicago. They bypassed New York and they went straight to the Donaway printing plant. And I've read that The magazine came out, it was spectacular, but nobody cared because it had been live on TV. And this sort of symbolized the beginning of the end of Life magazine as we knew it. But back to the inauguration, everything, looks seamless to us. The planning is incredible. Afterwards, when you were editing, did you second guess anything? We don't see where you could, but was there anything that you wish you had done differently? Or
the regret is that I have to spend too much time babysitting technology, to make sure that my remote fired, or that, like an audio technician wouldn't come in behind me and move a microphone and kill the picture. It was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I'm complaining about one camera. Andy Harnick from the AP, using all Sony cameras. You can network those like computers. He could fire 6 or 7 remotes peppered all over the place from one laptop, pushing his space bar and taking pictures with a long lens. And, I just wanted to get one thing right. He's trying to get 7 things right. And he has a technician running Ethernet cable by the 1,000 feet all over the Capitol so that they can do it. And, I think he would have preferred just to either shoot or man the laptop and not have to do both. But that's just my impression.
This kind of goes out to Pete or you, Chuck. What is the staff typically for when just a day-to-day kind of, as far as photographers and editors and that sort of thing for the White House?
For the White House itself, it just sort of was very driven by like what the events or meetings were at the time, or if there was travel involved, and it's sort of like zone defense. You want to make sure you've got someone or more than someone in the room if it's a big event, or if there's a case where Pete has to get in a van to go out to Air Force One because there's not room on the helicopter, that somebody's covering the Oval Office, or covering the departure, or that last minute event that he can't get to. So it's just really like looking through the day's schedule real closely to make sure you don't step on any oops. You don't want to go oops and have someone calling looking for you, because that would really suck.
But
I don't think I ever really missed anything in 8 years.
To expand upon that, so if, for instance, there was a press event in the Rose Garden, and there were lots of those, obviously, in the 8 years, there's kind of like a head-on position, and then there's what's called the cutaway position, on the side. And so Chuck would make sure that there was somebody in each of those positions. So and then I would do whatever in terms of when I followed the president out of the Oval Office after, whatever meeting he was having before he went out into the Rose Garden. So that, I knew that we've got the 2 money positions covered.
Well, you also kind of run into these situations where, it's like, when you remember like dance lessons, they would put like the little cutouts of footprints all around the floor and you're supposed to follow them. Like I know that if Pete's walking out of the Oval Office on live TV, he can only go but so far to a certain point. So we're just trying to like make sure that the various angles are covered and that nobody gets trapped in a place where they can't make a picture, or they'll like be so on camera getting around that, that turns into a thing. So it's, yeah.
And then Chuck would usually on those events in the Rose Garden, the East Room, whatever, would usually set up a remote somewhere, like as he's walking out, or just there was a whole different, well, it was somewhat limited, but he would usually set up a remote somewhere.
Yeah, if I thought it would, yield something better or different than a human being could do themselves. We had like so much ability to move around compared to the press that, sometimes a remote was just overkill, but sometimes it was like really cool. And, it's like, and how much time you have before that event because of whatever else you're doing. You know, it's just very fluid. Try and do the best thing you can at the time.
All right, we haven't heard from Joe yet. Joe, you got a question?
Oh, I don't know where to start. I just, you know, I've been thinking about how I look on the screen here today and with Chuck and Neil down at the bottom, I see Neil Ulovich down at the bottom, and I think of Pete, and I think of you guys, you know, being in Washington, D.C., and really being around the world when we think about some of the other photographers. And then there were the rest of us who stayed in Wisconsin for the most part. But you guys have made the world seem smaller, and it's exciting. And I've said, and I've wondered so many times, for Pete alone, for 8 years, how many pictures we all looked at that were Pete's and never knew Pete, or most of us didn't. And, you know, just how thankful we are. And, you know, just God, I mean, I think about how if I would have had one dream job, I think it would have been not working in DC as much as working in the White House. You know, God. But you guys, the pressure, I just so much appreciate hearing these stories, and God, just to know Pete, it's just, I mean, I don't know Pete yet. I haven't met Pete, but just the thrill. And, you know, it kind of reminded me of how you guys on a bad day, if there was a bad day, or let me put it another way, is back at the State Journal in Madison, if I was having a bad day, I would always remind myself that when we had an opening once, rare as it was, I remember the count was 230 applicants for that job, you know, and if you just slice off about 200 because they weren't qualified and then narrow it down to 10 or 15, they probably would have been better than I was. But it's just, you guys, is it a dream job that you have, Chuck?
It was an amazing, well, DC is my hometown and I never left. So, you know, I'll stick with that. I like being here. You know, I had 2 dream jobs. I worked for a really big, you know, newspaper chain when newspapers were a lot more vibrant than they are today. And I kind of had done as much as I could there. And I got this opportunity to come join the White House, which was an incredible experience and one that I'm grateful for on a daily basis. You know, and like you said, there's talent everywhere. You could find 10,000 excellent photographers. And, you know, that's where the world feels smaller to me is, you know, it used to be, I mean, people can make their voice known and their images available to the world with little more than what any of us have on our desk or in our pocket at any given moment. So it's just such a different, you know, perspective now.
I had another question. That's I remember. I guess that of all of the things I liked, it was spot news. You know, you had to think on your feet. You had to work. You had just the excitement, the thrill of spot news, and secondly, and maybe a close second, was the whole world of politicians. What makes them tick? I would love it when I was assigned to spend an entire day with a politician. And I remember the first time I was asked by a politician not to do something, not to capture a certain thing. And that stuck with me. And when you're one-on-one with a politician and he or she asks you or tells you not to do something or not to shoot something, you're sort of, you know, that's pretty much the end of the conversation. But going, you know, I don't know why I'm picking Mayor Pete, but in your career, have you been asked or told by politicians not to capture a certain angle or anything like that?
You know, I mean, I think one thing this is a good time to say is I think part of the reason we have a really excellent like record of the Obamas is the fact that they put up with us being around, you know, and let it happen. And, you know, there was very few times where we weren't around, and there was usually a very good reason not to. I mean, Pete can elaborate on that, but, you know, in my time with Mayor Pete, you know, he kind of knew going in that I kind of wanted a certain level of access, and that was important, and that we can always look at the photos on the back end, but like when things are happening, just let it happen, you know. And so no, not really. You know, and again, that's to the Obamas' credit that they would, you know, put up with us in a variety of situations, you know. And
yeah, just to take that a little further, I mean, I think that the first day that I met Barack Obama was his first day in the Senate, and I got special access because that was the hometown newspaper. And I made some pictures that first day of him and his girls in his little private office in the Senate. And they were like as intimate of pictures that I ever made of him. And I'm like, holy cow, this guy just does not give a shit that I'm in there taking pictures. Like it didn't faze him one bit.
And I know firsthand that like they appreciate the fact that, you know, aside from all of the official, you know, moments that we captured, you know, I think as a parent, they were like beside themselves that they have a really excellent record of their own children, you know, and their family.
I mean, for sure.
And I mean, not that we, you know, you know, when they were around, we took pictures, but you know, it's giving back to the whole family. You know?
Well, and I think that you know, Samantha Appleton, who did a lot of the early coverage of the First Lady, I knew that you know, he was used to cameras being around. You know, he was in the Senate. I was around him a lot during the Senate years, but then also during the campaign, there was, you know, always like either Callie Shell or somebody else backstage with him. So he's used to having cameras around, not so much for the First Lady. So I think it was probably, you know, an adjustment for her to suddenly, every time that she's doing something, to have somebody like, you know, kind of in her space, if you will, taking pictures. But, you know, after a while, I think they both got used to it. And then, you know, and I think in terms of as a news photographer during the Tribune days, I think there were some times where some politician might say something like that to me, Joe. I can't remember any specifics, but it sort of like rings a bell that maybe that might have happened, and that's an awkward, you know, position to be in. And part of it is, you know, they're concerned about the picture of them that's going to appear the next day in the Tribune. Whereas with the Obamas, even though they knew all the pictures are saved and they all end up at the National Archives, if it was going to be made public, they knew that there was that somebody from the press office eventually would have to sign off on it. So I think that sort of put them at ease a little bit more. Yeah. I've never really talked to him about it that much, to be honest with you, President Obama. I think he, you know, there was maybe 3 times where he was really pissed at me for some picture that I made public, like really pissed at me for like 5 minutes, and then he was over it, you know. But he, you know, would let me know, and it was usually not because of the way he looked. It was sort of the circumstances of the picture feeding into whatever cable TV was sort of talking about at the time.
Well, hey, Pete, what about Obama smoking?
Well, you know, he quit smoking in at the, I think at the very end of the first term. So I never saw him smoke. Yeah, we were trying, when he was a senator, we were trying to get a picture of him smoking, but
Yeah.
he would only smoke in his car, like in terms of, so he was, you know, very super careful about that. And then I got pictures of him chewing his gum, his nicotine gum though, which, you know, he and President Bush both just like were addicted to the
gum.
the chewing gum. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard stories.
Joe,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, Chuck.
No. I was just going to concur with Pete. Like, I guess I've known, you know, President Obama now for like 10 years. I've never seen him. I've seen him chew gum, but I've never seen him smoke a cigarette.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think he gave up. I mean, part of it was I can't remember exactly what it was. He sort of writes about it in this book,
Mhm.
and I can't remember if he says that Malia smelled smoke on him one day, or I think it was also, you know, he's about to pass the Affordable Care Act, and you know, he knew he needed to quit before that bill was passed. But I mean, he's very open about his smoking in his memoir. I mean, he sort of goes into it in more detail.
Mhm.
Joe, do you recall what the politician did not want photographed?
Oh, yeah,
And
very
did
clearly.
you-
Yeah, very clearly.
Did you go along? Did you go along with it?
I really did. It was probably my first year as a full-time photographer. I'd gone with it to a sister paper in Mason City, Iowa,
Oh, yeah.
and I was spending all day with a politician running for he's running for I don't know, some state. Anyhow, he was smoking, and it was backstage, and there were stage lights, and there was the drama of the black and the backlighting and this dude smoking. And you guys know what I'm talking about. It was an arty, a very arty photo with the smoke. You know what I'm talking about. I mean,
I
you
know what
couldn't
you're talking about.
you couldn't have set it up any better. And you know, damn right, just like what Pete was saying, is, you know, I wanted that picture for the next day's paper. But it was going to be part of a layout. So, I mean, it wasn't going to be the one and only picture. And it wasn't, I didn't mean it as a gotcha thing. It was just that this was this guy in a kind of a down time. He had 5 or 10 minutes where he had a break. And that stuck with me forever. You know, I thought I succumbed to his wishes, but in that situation, it was just, I was green, and frankly, I probably did the right thing. I didn't challenge him. I just didn't take any more pictures of that.
The smoke-filled rooms.
Oh, but also, you guys in a bigger world, it was pretty hard for well, except for the occasional intimate situations, yeah. But anyhow, you know, hey, I was just thinking too that, you know, we have ethics in this group, our group of photographers. So we probably wouldn't even ask a photographer who had been assigned or been shooting 45. But I kind of wonder if that was a bizarre situation. Any photos taken in the last administration?
Time will tell.
Yeah, well, I can just imagine what that was like.
Well, I managed to go 4 years with never once photographing President Trump. So I take that as like my mission accomplished.
Good luck. Yeah, that was good luck.
Pete was not so lucky. He had to.
Well, I mean, the only time I photographed him was on Inauguration Day.
That's what I'm saying.
You know, that was enough for me.
Yeah. my last day was the 19th, the night before Trump was sworn in. So
Did you guys, either one of you, work with Adam, the new photographer in the White House, presidential photographer?
I've like throughout this, I would crisscross with him during events and on the campaign, and we got to know each other a little bit. And like I said, I helped him out over the summer and this fall, but I'd never worked with him before that. He had worked. He had worked with Barbara Kinney in the Clinton campaign in 2016, which is where I guess I first met him.
Yeah, and so during the 2016 campaign, when President Obama would do a campaign event for Hillary, the counsel's office, just like, I had to travel alone. They wouldn't let us bring a second photographer. But Adam, if he was doing if President Obama was doing an event for Hillary, Adam would be the guy from the campaign that they would assign to cover President Obama. So because we couldn't give our pictures to Hillary's campaign of President Obama. And so that's how I got to know Adam a little bit, because I'd run into, he probably did maybe, I don't know, maybe half a dozen events where Adam was the Hillary's photographer covering the Obama event, you know, so that they could use the picture for whatever social media, whatever like that.
And do you guys, now that we're 30 days or so into the Biden administration, do you have any kind of a feel as to how they're going to run the photo side of things?
I mean, I think similar to the way that I did, the way that we did. I talked to Adam maybe like, I want to say like about a week before the inauguration. And then, you know, every once in a while he'll, you know, he has a question about something. Or I've proactively sent him, I think probably 2 or 3 messages about certain things, like just, you know, thoughts that would come to my head that I didn't tell him when I talked to him on the phone, of just sort of things to keep in mind.
Yeah, as Adam was, you know, getting ready for this, you know, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, you know, he worked closely with Barbara Kinney, and she had worked in the Clinton White House, and he talked to me a great deal, and somebody from the Bush administration. I mean, he's really trying to, you know, educate himself on what had been done and where he wanted it to go. So, you know, he's a smart guy. He'll do fine.
Yeah, I mean, he had a couple ideas that he threw by me that, you know, were some things that we didn't do, and I was like, I mean, you go for it if that's what you want to do. I mean, doesn't, you don't like have to copy what we did. I'm just telling you, here's the way we did it, and you know, you got to figure it out for yourself and what's best for, you know, President Biden, and you know, so it's kind of his show.
You know, it's like you want to offer as much advice to give someone a good starting point, and then, as I told him, it's like, you know, once you get it rolling, you can do whatever you want. You know, within
in that respect, question for Chuck and Pete. I don't know if you want to address this. Was there any sort of transition with Sheila Craighead for 45's administration, or was it a cold start for her?
She had worked in the Bush photo office doing a lot of Laura Bush stuff. So she wasn't, you know, she'd been around before. Honestly, I haven't spoken to her in 4 years, so I have no idea. I mean, I know she was appointed pretty late in the process, like, you know, right up to the inauguration.
So I mean, I can speak to that a little bit. She called me. As Chuck said, she was appointed, like, I think 2 days before the inauguration. And she called me, and I probably, you know, talked to her for about an hour, and then she called me back, and she had just because of the late start. She had like no credentials, no anything. And so the one thing that I did to try to help her out was I got the Secret Service to make sure that she was on, you know, the list to be able to come into the White House. They called, this is the presidential detail. They called their counterparts on the Trump detail to say, hey, give this woman a pin, a staff pin, you know, so that the Secret Service would, and you know, and I gave her my cell number, and she actually got to the White House the day of the inauguration before Trump, which was weird in itself, because like, why aren't you with Trump? But nonetheless, so I actually introduced her to the Obamas on inauguration day, and then I kind of didn't see her after that. Funny thing happened was I was flying to Palm Springs with the Obamas, and we're on the plane, and I'm looking at social media, and she's getting trashed on social media. Shayla was. And I was like, okay, I got to come to her defense, you know. So I made some post on Facebook, you know, to, you know, welcome her to the club of White House photographers, and let's let her do her job. And when we started to land in Palm Springs, we had, I think it was 4 aborted landings, which was a little scary, I have to say.
Wow.
There was a lot of fog and stuff, and people were, I mean, Valerie Jarrett, I thought she was going to have a heart attack. But anyway, we got so low that my phone rang on one of the approaches, and it's Shayla calling me, and she says, "Can you please take your post down?" And I'm like, "Well, I was trying to come to your defense." And she said, "Well, I haven't been hired yet." And I was like, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, I'm just on a tryout." I was like,
oh, wow.
I was like blown away by that. And so she officially didn't get hired until 2 weeks later, even though she was working in the White House for 2 weeks, which was kind of, the whole thing was kind of bizarre. And that's the last time I talked to her.
Yeah. I mean, I got to say, like, you know, when it was announced that I would be coming in 2009, you know, I was out in my driveway, you know, in DC doing something, and a car pulls up, and it's a former White House photographer who worked for President Bush. And he was like, "Hey, I just heard the great news. I mean, I was just going to walk my dog and I saw you out here." And, you know, we must have talked for an hour and a half. And he was the most generous with his knowledge, and genuinely happy at the team that was coming together. And, you know, like, it was comforting to know that there was someone who had done it and knew what was going on, was able to talk and offer advice, photographer to photographer. It was a classy thing, and I will always appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know why Shayla never called me. You know, maybe because she started seeing my posts on Instagram.
maybe it just got her in trouble. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's I think that you know, by and large, the you know, my predecessors and were always available for me to talk to, and you know, and I said that to Adam as well. You know, you can call me anytime. And like I said, he's, you know, asked me a few questions the first couple of weeks. So, but I don't want to be like, oh, you know, it's, if he doesn't want my advice, that's fine too.
Yeah.
I appreciate your candor and the presentation. I have to leave, unfortunately, but it's been tremendous.
Well, nice to meet you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Chuck and Pete, and take care.
I'll add this to my Friday afternoon rounds.
Yeah, you have an open invitation. Come join us anytime.
All right.
Anybody else have a quick question for Chuck about the inauguration coverage?
Oh, Chuck, you got my attention when I think everybody heard you when you said that you had notified, you went up on the hotel roof with the hotel engineer and you had previously notified the Secret Service. Am I right?
Yeah, a number of people I notified.
I can imagine.
They can see me in the dark, and they're good shots. I didn't want to be spooking anyone.
Is it that drop dead serious? No pun intended, but I mean, is it?
Well,
is
I mean,
you just know,
you know, those adjacent rooftops have a clear line of sight to the White House grounds, and you know, I know what's installed on the roof of the White House, and like I think all of those buildings have, you know, like an agreement, like if they need to go, you know, tend to business, that they'll, you know, let them know, just so that everyone knows, like, oh, they're up there for a reason, you know.
And then when you said you had a ladder, a 6 or 8 foot ladder, did that mean you had an assistant?
No, I was smart enough to ask the advance person who was building the site at the Lincoln Memorial to ask the lighting crew to set one aside for me, because I wanted to get high enough so that, you know, the Bidens and the Harrises would be, you know, into the water of the reflecting pool, as opposed to some weird horizon going through their heads or something. That's all.
So I got to say, Chuck, that when I saw the pictures from that event, you know, I saw the wire photos first, and then I saw your photo. I was like, oh, Chuck has a ladder.
Yeah,
I could tell, man. It makes a difference.
It makes a difference. It
On
totally
that picture,
made a
it made a
difference.
difference. Yeah.
Well, you know, and plus it really makes a difference when you're the only person with a ladder, because then you have 18 other sources of photos that are all at a certain light, you know, height, and then, you know, you can clearly stand out, as it were. Plus, then I don't have to get in any scrums. I just shoot high and dry, you know.
Do you think anybody's using a drone around the White House? No.
DC, in like national parks, is just a total no-fly zone for.
That's called a national park?
Well, DC like national parks, and technically the White House itself is national park property. But DC is like a big no-fly zone for drones.
Guessing they don't want Marine One bumping into one by accident. It'd probably be a bad thing.
I would think so.
Well, great. Thank you very much, Chuck, for joining us, and really appreciate your time, and for Pete for setting this up. And we don't have any idea who's going to be next month's guest. I don't even have the date, but it'll be the last Friday of the month.
I sent Pete an Instagram message yesterday with a photographer based in Austin who's been doing a lot of work for the New York Times and has covered a lot of the, you know, the last few weeks down there, last couple of weeks. So he might be worth getting a hold of. I don't know if Pete checks his Instagram.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I saw that.
He's on once in a while.
I checked the guy's website too. So.
Yeah. For those of you watching, we just talked yesterday about possibly having somebody on from that had been covering the Texas storms down there, and maybe have some drama about all the coverage, the hassle of trying to shoot it in conditions like that. So
here's another thought, Steve, is like, because when Joe asked about drones, you know, there's this kid here in Madison that's doing a lot of drone work.
Yeah.
I wonder if it might be interested to have somebody that's doing drone work, or Cameron Davidson, or, you know,
who's from the Chicago Tribune.
Zvignew.
He's done some amazing stuff.
Yeah, he just retired. He's another. Yeah, I don't know where he's living now. I think he might have moved to New Mexico, but I could track him down. I mean, I know his wife too. So
is that Samuel Lee?
Yeah.
There's a lot of the stuff at the Capitol, and
I don't know the guy at all, but I was like, he's like, shit, man. He's got some pretty cool pictures. I mean, he's mostly doing video, I think, but it's like at the Capitol, you can. there's another guy that I've seen using a drone. It's like he's standing like 20 feet from the Capitol, sending the drone up to shoot right over the Capitol. And it's like totally legal. Like, I'm like, man, you
Wow.
can't get away with that shit in DC.
No. Definitely true.
Yeah, those are great ideas, and I'm writing them all down. So if anybody has anything else, feel free to email them in or let me know one way or the other, and
Cool.
we will go from there. But thank
All
you
right.
guys again. And if anybody wants to stay on, I'm gonna hit the stop on the record button. But if anybody wants to continue to talk, feel free. I'll leave the room up, and people can chat as much as they want, and go from there. So thank you guys again.
I'm gonna have to sign off. I'm getting in the car and driving to
All right.
see our
Say-
granddaughter.
Say hi to Patty.
Okay, see you guys.
Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah, nice meeting you guys. Anything else? Or...
Well, I'd like to give a heads up and a little kudos. As everyone knows, that United Airlines was raining airplane parts in my neighborhood, and
Oh, that was... okay.
and actually, the airway goes right over my house, and about, by my figuring, a minute and 45 seconds later is when it started dropping parts near my favorite Chinese restaurant in Broomfield. But the reason I mention this is because you probably also saw pictures that were taken from the ground straight up with a telephoto of the jet with one engine smoking
Yes.
and fire coming out of it.
Yes.
And I was wondering who on earth took those pictures.
No,
Taken by a wedding photographer.
no kidding.
There are a number of airplane spotters that follow the because all that information is posted online of where the airplanes are at, and they will post pictures of airplanes from 20,000 feet, and they get some pretty clear stuff.
Right. Well, she was definitely on the ground.
Yes.
The airplane wasn't that high, and I never heard of her, and so I tried to get in touch with her to try to do a blog piece, and no response. Apparently, she was totally inundated, not so much by airplane parts, but by news agencies and everyone else. But what a moment, to be standing there and look up and have your camera right there and photograph this airplane right above your head, smoking like a son of a gun.